If you're ready for an incredible journey through Norse mythology, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel for more legendary Viking stories, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Your support helps us bring these ancient tales to life. The fjord stretched endlessly before me, its dark waters reflecting the pale northern sky like a mirror of forgotten dreams. My name is Ragnar Ironwill, though the Ironwill part came much later, earned through blood, fire, and choices that still haunt my dreams. But this story begins when I was nothing more than a nameless boy, abandoned on the rocky shores of what would later be called the Forgotten Coast. I was perhaps 7 winters old when Chieftain Olaf Bloodaxe found me, half dead and delirious, clutching something that would change the course of my entire existence. The morning mist hung heavy over the settlement of Ravenshollow, and I remember the sound of his boots crunching against the frost-covered pebbles as he approached my shivering form. "By Thor's hammer," he muttered, his weathered face creased with concern. "What do we have here?" In my trembling hands, pressed against my chest like a precious treasure, was an egg unlike anything the Norse had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a man's fist, its shell shimmering with colors that seemed to dance in the dim light. Deep crimsons that pulsed like a heartbeat, golds that flickered like flame, and oranges that reminded me of the setting sun over the mountains. The surface was warm to the touch, so warm that it had kept me alive through the bitter night. Olaf's wife, Astrid the Wise, took me into their longhouse. The great hall was filled with the smell of burning pine and roasted meat, and animal pelts lined the walls, alongside shields bearing the marks of countless battles. She was a woman of few words, but infinite kindness, her silver hair braided with small bones and wooden charms that clicked softly when she moved. "The child speaks no words," she whispered to her husband that first night as I sat by the central fire pit, still clutching the strange egg. "But his eyes, they burn with something ancient." The egg never left my side. During the day, I would help with simple tasks around the settlement, feeding the goats, carrying water from the well, helping to mend fishing nets. But always, the egg remained close. The other children of Ravenshollow thought it was merely a pretty stone painted by some distant craftsman. They couldn't feel the gentle pulse that emanated from within, the subtle warmth that grew stronger with each passing moon. It was during my 3rd winter in Ravenshollow that everything changed. The settlement had been preparing for the harsh months ahead. The men had returned from their final fishing expedition of the season, their boats heavy with cod and herring. The women had finished preserving the last of the berries and vegetables. The great hall was filled with the sounds of preparation, the rhythmic thudding of axes splitting firewood, the scraping of knives against leather as they sharpened weapons, the low murmur of voices sharing stories of summers past. I was alone in the storage room behind the main hall, organizing sacks of barley and oats, when I heard it, a sound so soft I thought I might have imagined it, a tiny crack like the breaking of a small twig. I looked down at the egg, which I had placed carefully on a pile of wool sacks while I worked. Another crack, this one louder. My heart began to race as I watched a thin line appear across the shell's surface. The colors seemed to intensify, pulsing more rapidly now, and the warmth increased until the egg felt like a burning coal in my hands. I sank to my knees, transfixed, as more cracks spread across the surface like spider webs. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, the egg split open. What emerged was not a bird as I had expected, but something far more magnificent and terrifying. A creature no larger than a sparrow, but blazing with inner fire. Its feathers were not feathers at all, but flames that danced and flickered without burning. Its eyes were like 2 small suns, golden and ancient, filled with wisdom that seemed to span centuries. When it spread its tiny wings, the air around us shimmered with heat, and I could smell the scent of burning cedar and distant summers. The Fênix, for I knew instantly what it was, though I had never seen one before, looked at me with those burning eyes, and I felt a connection form between us that went deeper than words or thought. It was as if our souls had recognized each other across the vast expanse of time and space. "Hello, little flame," I whispered, extending my hand carefully. The phoenix chirped once, a sound like wind chimes made of fire, and hopped onto my palm. Its tiny claws felt warm, but not painful, and when it nuzzled against my thumb, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. Joy, loneliness, hope, and a fierce protective instinct all rolled into one overwhelming wave. From that moment, the phoenix and I were inseparable. I named him Emberwind, and he became my constant companion, usually perched on my shoulder or hidden in the folds of my cloak. The people of Raven's Hollow were amazed by the Firebird, as they called him, but they accepted him as part of our strange little family. Olaf declared it a sign of good fortune, and Astrid would often smile as she watched Emberwind play in the flames of the hearth, dancing among the burning logs without ever being consumed. As the years passed, I grew from a scrawny, abandoned child into a young man of 13 winters. My shoulders broadened from years of hard work, my hands became calloused from wielding axes and hauling nets, and my voice deepened as I learned the songs and stories of my adopted people. But through it all, Emberwind remained unchanged, still small, still blazing with that inner fire, still my most loyal friend and confidant. It was during my 13th winter that the raiders came. I awoke in the deep hours of the night to the sound of screaming and the smell of burning thatch. Emberwind was already awake, perched on the edge of my sleeping furs, his flames burning brighter than usual in apparent agitation. Through the smoke-filled air of the longhouse, I could see orange light flickering, not the warm, comforting light of our hearth, but the wild, destructive glow of buildings set ablaze. "Raiders!" Olaf's voice boomed through the hall as he rallied the men. "Arm yourselves! Protect the children and the grain stores!" The attack was swift and brutal. A rival clan from the eastern fjords, led by a savage warrior named Grim the Bone Crusher, had come in the night with fire and steel. Their dragon-proud ships had slipped through the morning mist undetected, and now they swept through Raven's Hollow like a plague of destruction. I grabbed my small sayax, a single-edged knife that Olaf had given me on my 12th birthday, and prepared to defend my home. But even as I gripped the weapon, I felt something else stirring within me. A strange energy that seemed to flow from Emberwind, through our connection, and into my very bones. The door to our longhouse burst open, and 3 raiders stormed in. They were massive men, their faces painted with blue war paint, their weapons gleaming with fresh blood. The first one spotted me and grinned, revealing teeth filed to sharp points. "A whelp with a toy knife," he laughed, raising his battle-axe. "This will be quick sport." But as he brought the axe down toward my head, something extraordinary happened. Time seemed to slow, and I felt that strange energy surge through my body like liquid fire. My muscles responded with speed and strength I had never possessed before. I sidestepped the axe blow with inhuman grace, spun around behind the raider, and drove my sayax deep into his back before he could react. The second raider roared in fury and swung his sword in a wide arc. Again, that supernatural speed filled my limbs. I ducked under the blade, grabbed a burning log from the fire pit, and struck him across the temple with enough force to crack his skull. He dropped like a felled tree. The third raider hesitated, his eyes wide with shock and fear. In that moment of hesitation, I felt the power coursing through me like a raging river. I could see every detail of his movements before he made them, could anticipate his attacks with perfect clarity. When he finally charged, I met him head-on, my small knife finding the gaps in his mail with surgical precision. When the battle was over, I stood among the bodies of 3 seasoned warriors, my hands shaking with the aftermath of violence and the intoxicating rush of power. But as I looked around for Emberwind, my heart sank with horror. My loyal Fênix companion was perched on a nearby beam, but something was terribly wrong. Where once his flames had burned bright and vigorous, now they seemed dimmer, smaller. His golden eyes, once blazing with youthful fire, appeared somehow older, wearier. Even his size seemed slightly larger, as if he had aged months in the span of minutes. "Emberwind," I called softly, extending my hand. He flew to me with his usual grace, but when he landed on my palm, I could feel the difference immediately. His inner fire, while still warm and comforting, had lost some of its intensity. It was as if using that supernatural power had somehow drawn upon his very life force, aging him in exchange for granting me abilities far beyond those of any mortal man. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The power that had saved my life and allowed me to defend my home had come at a terrible cost, not to me but to the creature I loved more than life itself. As dawn broke over the smoking ruins of Raven's Hollow, I held Emberwind close to my chest and made a silent vow. I would find a way to understand this power, to control it, and if possible, to break whatever dark connection existed between my newfound abilities and my friend's life force. But first, we had to survive. The raiders had been driven off, but they had taken their toll. Olaf lay dead in the great hall, his battle-axe still clutched in his hands. Astrid had survived, but barely, and many of the other villagers were either dead or wounded. The settlement was in ruins, the grain stores burned, the boats damaged beyond repair. As the survivors gathered in the smouldering remains of our home, I realized that my childhood was over. The abandoned boy who had been found on the shores 13 years ago was gone, replaced by something new and dangerous, a young man with the power to kill, but cursed with the knowledge that every use of that power brought his dearest friend closer to death. The journey ahead would be long and perilous, filled with choices that would test not only my strength and courage, but the very bonds of loyalty and love that connected me to the miraculous creature who had become my closest companion. And somewhere out there, beyond the familiar borders of our destroyed settlement, lay answers to questions I had never thought to ask, about the nature of power, the price of strength, and the terrible beauty of sacrifice. But those discoveries would have to wait. For now, we had the dead to bury, the wounded to tend, and a new life to build from the ashes of the old. 5 years had passed since the night of the raid, and the ruins of Raven's Hollow had long since been reclaimed by wild grass and circling ravens. I was 18 winters old now, lean and hard from years of wandering, my face weathered by countless storms, and my hands scarred from battles I wished I could forget. Emberwind remained my constant companion, but the changes in him were impossible to ignore. What had once been a small, sparrow-sized phoenix was now nearly the size of a hawk. His flames, while still beautiful, burned with a steadier, more mature light, less of the wild, dancing fire of youth and more of the deep, banked coals of middle age. His golden eyes held depths of wisdom and sadness that broke my heart every time I looked into them. Each time I had been forced to call upon the supernatural power that flowed between us, he had aged months or even years in mere moments. We had wandered the northern lands as sellswords and mercenaries, my reputation growing with each victory. They called me Ragnar the Untouchable, for no blade seemed able to find my flesh, no warrior could match my speed. But only Emberwind and I knew the true cost of these victories. The gradual dimming of his inner fire, the slow transformation from eternal youth to approaching old age. It was during a particularly harsh winter that we found ourselves in the ancient forest of Ironwood, following rumors of a hidden treasure that might hold the key to breaking the curse that bound us. The trees here were older than memory, their massive trunks scarred by centuries of storms, and their branches twisted into strange, almost runic shapes that seemed to whisper secrets in the wind. We had been tracking a pack of wolves for 3 days, hoping to trade their pelts for information about the legendary vault of the First Kings, when Emberwind suddenly veered away from our intended path. His behavior was unusual. Instead of his normal, graceful flight, he was moving with urgent, almost frantic wing beats, calling out in a series of sharp chirps that I had never heard before. "What is it, old friend?" I asked, following him deeper into the forest. "What do you sense?" The Fênix led me through a maze of fallen logs and twisted roots, past frozen streams and clearings where the snow lay undisturbed by human footprints. The silence here was profound and unsettling, as if the very forest was holding its breath. Even the wind seemed muted, barely stirring the ice-laden branches above our heads. After nearly an hour of walking, we came to a place that defied explanation. In the center of a perfectly circular clearing stood a ring of standing stones, each one carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The runes seemed to shift and change when viewed from the corner of my eye, their meanings dancing just beyond the edge of comprehension. But it was what lay in the center of the stone circle that truly captured my attention. Embedded in a boulder of black granite was a weapon unlike any I had ever seen. It was neither sword nor axe, but something that seemed to combine elements of both. A long, straight blade that tapered to a wicked point, with an edge that gleamed like starlight, even in the dim forest light. The grip was wrapped in leather that looked as fresh as if it had been crafted yesterday, despite the weapon's obviously ancient origin. And along the fuller of the blade, more of those shifting runes had been etched, their meaning tantalizingly close, yet frustratingly distant. But it was the pommel that made my breath catch in my throat. There, carved in perfect detail, was the image of a phoenix in flight, its wings spread wide and its head thrown back in what could have been either triumph or anguish. "The blade of eternal choosing," I whispered, the words coming from some deep well of ancestral memory. "I've heard this name in the oldest songs." Emberwind landed on my shoulder, his small claws digging in with unusual intensity. When I looked at him, I saw something in his ancient eyes that chilled me more than the winter wind: recognition, and what might have been fear. As I approached the stone circle, the runes on the standing stones began to glow with a faint pulsing light. The same light appeared along the blade of the embedded weapon, and suddenly the meaning of the ancient symbols became as clear as if they had been written in my own tongue. Power calls to power, and strength demands its price. The blade that grants dominion over all enemies shall drink deep of that which the wielder holds most dear. Choose, warrior of the flame bird. Choose between the might to conquer worlds and the life of he who flies beside you. The full horror of the situation crashed over me like an avalanche. This was no ordinary magical weapon. It was a trap, a test, perhaps even a curse designed to present the cruelest choice imaginable. I could claim the blade and become truly invincible, capable of facing any enemy without fear of defeat. But doing so would immediately claim Emberwind's life, draining away every remaining year of his existence to fuel my own power. "No," I said aloud, backing away from the circle. "There has to be another way." But even as I spoke the words, I knew they were hollow. The runes were ancient beyond measure, their magic woven into the very fabric of reality. There was no bargaining with forces that predated the gods themselves, no clever trick that could circumvent the fundamental law they represented. All power demands sacrifice, and the greater the power, the greater the cost. Emberwind flew from my shoulder to perch on one of the standing stones, his mature flames casting dancing shadows across the carved symbols. When he looked at me, I saw something that nearly brought me to my knees: understanding, acceptance, and what could only be described as a gentle, loving smile in those golden eyes. "Take it," his voice whispered in my mind, not heard with my ears, but felt directly in my soul. It was the first time he had ever spoken to me in words, and the sound of his mental voice was like warm honey mixed with the crackle of a comfortable fire. "I have lived more years in your company than any of my kind has a right to expect. I have seen wonders, felt love, known friendship. That is worth any price." "No!" I shouted, my voice echoing strangely in the sacred space. "I won't do it. I won't trade your life for power, no matter how great." "And what of all the lives you could save with such strength?" Emberwind asked gently. "What of the villages that will burn because you lack the power to stop the raiders? What of the innocent children who will die because their protector chose sentiment over necessity?" His words hit me like physical blows, each one carrying the weight of absolute truth. In the 5 years since Hollow's destruction, I had witnessed countless atrocities that I had been powerless to prevent. Families slaughtered by bandits, entire settlements put to the torch by warlords, children sold into slavery while their parents' blood still stained the ground. With the power of the blade of eternal choosing, I could end such suffering. I could become a force for justice and protection across all the northern lands, but the cost... I sank to my knees in the snow, my head in my hands, torn between love and duty, between the selfish desire to protect my dearest friend and the selfless need to serve a greater good. The weight of the choice pressed down on me like a mountain, threatening to crush my spirit entirely. "Tell me about the boy you saved last month," Emberwind said softly. "The one in the burning village." I remembered. A child no more than 6 winters old, trapped beneath a fallen beam while flames consumed his home. I had pulled him free and carried him to safety, but not before the fire had left terrible scars across half his face. With the power of the blade, I could have saved him before he was injured at all. And the young woman in the fishing village, the one taken by the slave traders. Another memory, another failure. By the time I had arrived, the raiders were already disappearing over the horizon with their human cargo. I had been fast, but not fast enough, strong, but not strong enough. With true power, I could have caught them, freed the captives, ended their vile trade forever. How many more will suffer because you chose to protect one old Fênix? Emberwind asked, his mental voice heavy with sadness. How many more innocents will pay the price of your sentimentality? The logic was inexorable, the mathematics of morality cruel but undeniable. One life against thousands, personal love against universal justice. The choice that kings and heroes had faced since the beginning of time. The choice between what they wanted and what the world needed. I rose slowly to my feet, my decision crystallizing in my heart like ice forming on still water. Each step toward the center of the circle felt like walking through quicksand, but I forced myself forward. The blade seemed to pulse with anticipation as I approached, its runes growing brighter with each footfall. "I understand," Emberwind said simply, "and I forgive you. More than that, I am proud of you." My hand closed around the grip of the weapon, and immediately I felt a surge of power beyond anything I had ever experienced. The blade came free of the stone as easily as if it had been waiting for me all along. Energy coursed through my body like liquid lightning, transforming every muscle, every bone, every drop of blood into something far beyond human limitations. But even as the power flowed into me, I felt another current moving in the opposite direction, Emberwind's life force, drawn inexorably into the hungry blade. I turned to look at him, tears streaming down my face as his flames began to dim. He was growing smaller again, his adult form reverting to the size he had been when he first hatched from the mysterious egg. But this was not a return to youth. It was the final compression of a life lived in fast forward, all his remaining years condensing into these last precious moments. "Remember me," he whispered, his mental voice growing fainter with each word. "Remember that love is the only power that truly lasts, even when life does not. And remember that sometimes the greatest sacrifice is allowing someone else to make one." I ran to him, dropping the blade and gathering his tiny, fading form in my hands. His flames were barely visible now, little more than a warm glow against my palms. His golden eyes, once so bright and full of ancient wisdom, were growing dim. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry, my friend." "Do not be sorry," he breathed, his voice now no more than a whisper of wind through autumn leaves. "Be worthy. Make this choice mean something. Use the power to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And know that wherever the path takes you, part of me will always fly beside you." With those words, the last of his flames flickered and died. Emberwind, my companion of 18 years, my dearest friend and most loyal ally, was gone. His small form crumbled to ash in my hands, leaving behind only the memory of warmth and the echo of unconditional love. I knelt there in the snow for a long time, holding the remains of my friend, while the power of the blade hummed through my veins. When I finally stood, I was no longer the same person who had entered the circle. The magic had transformed me into something far more than human, faster than the wind, stronger than the storm, deadlier than winter itself. But the greatest change was not in my body. It was in my heart, where love and loss had forged themselves into an unbreakable resolve. I picked up the blade of eternal choosing and felt its weight, not just the physical heft of metal and leather, but the spiritual burden of the choice I had made. Every life I saved would honor Emberwind's sacrifice. Every act of justice would be a monument to his memory. As I left the stone circle and began the long journey back to the world of men, I carried with me the echoes of his final words. Part of him would always fly beside me, not as a companion of flesh and flame, but as a guiding spirit woven into the very fabric of my purpose. The abandoned boy had become a man. The man had become something more than human, and the Fênix, who had given everything for that transformation, would live on in every life saved, every wrong righted, every innocent protected by the power born from his sacrifice. The legend of Ragnar, the Fênix Blessed, was about to begin. Years passed like seasons, and the legend grew with each telling. They say that in the deepest forests of the north, when the moon is dark and the mist lies heavy on the ground, you can still see him. The Fênix Blessed, the untouchable, the last guardian of the ancient ways. His blade never dulls, his aim never fails, and those who prey upon the innocent learn to fear the whisper of wind that announces his coming. But on quiet nights, when the northern lights dance across the sky in sheets of gold and crimson, the sharpest eyes might catch a glimpse of something else. A small flame dancing just above his shoulder, a flicker of eternal fire that death itself could not extinguish. For love, true love, transcends even the most powerful magic. And sometimes, if you know how to look, you can see that part of Emberwind did indeed live on, flying forever beside the friend who chose to honor his sacrifice with a lifetime of service to others. The egg had been a gift, the Fênix had been a blessing, the choice had been a curse, but the love was eternal, burning bright in the darkness, a beacon of hope for all who still believe that some bonds can never truly be broken. In memory of all the loyal companions who give everything for those they love, asking nothing in return, save to be remembered with honor. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through Norse mythology. If this tale of sacrifice, loyalty, and the true price of power moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more epic Viking stories, and tell us in the comments which part of Ragnar and Emberwind's story touched your heart the most. Until next time, may your own companions be as loyal as the Fênix, and your choices as worthy as the legends they create.